Today we're going to look at the properties of multiplication and addition. The identity property of addition and the identity property of multiplication tell us that the number that we're multiplying or we're adding will keep its identity. So when we add 0 to any number, it keeps its identity. If you look at the example of the little smiley face emoji, if you add 0 to him, he stays the same. Same thing with the identity property of multiplication. Whenever you multiply anything by 1, it keeps its identity. So any number multiplied by 1 just stays that number. Now let's look at the commutative properties of addition and the commutative properties of multiplication. When adding 2 or more numbers, you can add them in any order, and the answer will stay the same. This also holds true for the commutative property of multiplication. When multiplying 2 or more numbers, you can multiply them in any order, and the answer will stay the same. You should notice when you go back and look at the commutative property of addition that the 2 emojis on the left side of the equal sign are the same 2 emojis on the right side, just the order was switched. Same thing on the commutative property of multiplication. The same 2 emojis are on the left as are on the right side. All they did was switch the order. Now let's look at the associative properties of addition and multiplication. When adding 2 or more numbers, the grouping of the numbers does not change the sum. So whenever you add 2 numbers and then you add a third number to it, it doesn't matter if you add the first 2 numbers and then add the third number, or if you add the last 2 numbers and then add the first number to it. You will get the same answer. That also holds true for multiplying. If you multiply the first 2 numbers and then multiply it by a third number, it will equal the last 2 numbers multiplied together and then multiplied by the first number. Finally, let's look at the distributive property. The distributive property states that multiplying a number by a sum or a difference is the same as multiplying each number in the sum or difference and then adding or subtracting. We're going to do more practice on this in the next lesson, but for now we'll look at the little emojis here. If you take our little smiley face emoji in front of the parentheses, this says multiply him by the first guy and multiply him by the second guy. Notice in our answer on the other side of the equal sign, each pair has that smiley face emoji now in them. Okay? And like I said, we're going to do some more practice with these in the next lesson. If you go up and you look at the 7 examples here, you can see number 1, they're showing us the distributive property. In order to do this, they first multiplied 7 by x, and then they added that to 7 times 8. So again, if you do 7 times x, you get 7x. If you do 7 times 8, you get 56. You cannot combine these 2 terms because they are not like each other. They both do not have an x in them. If we look at number 2, you will notice that we have 2 plus 5 on one side and 5 plus 2 on the other side. And all they did was switch the order of these 2. And when you switch order, that's the commutative property. And obviously there are plus signs, so it's the commutative property of addition. Number 3, I noticed that there are 3 numbers on the left side of the equal sign, and there are 3 numbers on the right side. And all they did was switch the order in which the numbers are in the parentheses. So that's the associative property of multiplication because it involves multiplication. Number 4, we have 6 plus 0 equals 6. Well, again, whenever you add 0, the number kept its identity. So that's the identity property of addition. Number 5. We have 2 plus 9 in parentheses, and then that's added to 8. So I have 3 numbers before the equal sign. I have 3 numbers after, and all I did was change which numbers were in the parentheses. So again, that's our associative property, and of course it involves addition. Number 6 is the identity property of multiplication, because anytime you multiply a number by 1, it keeps its identity. Thus, 5 times 1 equals 5. And finally, the last one is the commutative property of multiplication. And again, I notice that there are 2 numbers on the left side of the equal sign, 2 numbers on the right side. And all they did was switch the order. 6 times 4 is the same as 4 times 6. It doesn't matter which way you multiply, you will always get the same answer. And that's the commutative property of multiplication. We're going to do some more practice on the next page. I'd like you to try the problems on the equivalent expressions page. Do your best. Any ones that you have trouble with, we will go over in class tomorrow.